sometime, and we'll welcome everyone else who is able to come a little bit later. My name is Roger Thornton. I had the honor of serving as chair of the task force appointed by the mayor in early October. Our initial charge was to look at fire protection. Later, that expanded to also include police facility. So our group was renamed to the Public Safety Task Force. In the 6-month period from October 2020 through the end of March 2021, we learned a lot as a group. We worked really hard. Some of the things we learned are as follows. We learned that our present staffing model for fire protection in Bluffton and the fire territory is not adequate to safely protect our residents, our firefighters, or our community. We learned that our facility is not adequate to house gender diversity now or in the future, and we do have a lady on our firefighting staff. We're not prepared for that. We know that it doesn't provide for adequate carcinogen exposure remediation. That is when the firefighters come in from a fire. We don't do adequately what needs to be done to protect them. We also learned that it is too small to house all of our equipment. We learned that funding the recommended additional staff will require no additional taxes or fees for township residents and a minimal increase for city residents. That minimal increase is about $30 a year. We learned that funding the recommended facility charges will require an increase in city property taxes, but I'll share now that will be a very reasonable increase, and we'll talk about it more in depth. We learned also that if the city of Bluffton and the fire territory renew the agreement under which fire protection is provided both for the city and the townships, we believe 2 stations will best serve the present and the future fire protection needs of Bluffton and the fire territory. The task force has made its recommendations to the mayor. The final decisions, and please hear me clearly on this, the final decisions regarding what we cover tonight will be made by the mayor, the city council, the Fire Protection Territory Board, the Lancaster and Harrison Township trustees and advisory boards, respectively. Ours was not a decision-making group, it was a study and recommendation group. Our goal tonight is to share with you as clearly as we can what we learned and why we made the recommendations that we made. I'd like to introduce the task force members who are able to be here tonight. They deserve your thanks. They put up with me. They put up with the fire chief and deputy chief, and they work like that. And we appreciate that a lot. First, Eric Gerber from Edge Manufacturing. Eric, would you stand? Chip Mann from Pretzels. Good. Tammy Schaefer, retired police chief. Steve Gerber, owner of Outdoor Concepts. Steve. Kyle Hunt. Kyle is unable to be here. I think he may be here a little later. Marcia Meyer, Township Trustee, Lancaster Township. Fire Chief John Craig, and Deputy Chief Chris Ward. Dave Schultz also attended, I believe, every one of our meetings, probably deserves honorary status as a member of the task force as well. Let's begin with the documents before you. Please note that we'll take questions at the conclusion. We have a lot to go through. We want to use your time wisely, and so please take note of your questions. We'll get them at the end, we promise. Document 1. Document 1 is the letter we sent Mayor Wicker at the conclusion of our study. It was also shared with the Common Council. They have a copy of it, and we'll be dealing with it later. In this, I want you to know that Chief Craig and Deputy Chief Wolf will be addressing point 1 of the letter, part of point 3 and point 5 as they review documents in your packet. I will address point 2, part of point 3, and point 4 as I review several of the documents in your packet as well. If you would, please turn to document number 2. This document is the agreement, the existing agreement between the City of Bluffton and the Township Fire Protection District territory. And this is the second of a 5-year agreement. This one began on January 1st, 2019, and will expire December 31st, 2023. If you would, look at point 2. It charges the city with the responsibility of staffing, the equipment, and everything that is required to provide fire protection for the City of Bluffton, the Township of Lancaster outside of Bluffton, and the Township of Harrison outside of Bluffton. It's that all-encompassing agreement. Point 3 essentially says we'll maintain and operate all of that equipment as well. Point 6 on the next page says the territory agrees to pay to the city the following: the sum of tax distributions to the fire territory from general property taxes, local income tax, vehicle aircraft excise tax, and commercial vehicle excise tax. What happens is that all of the money collected, and there is a property tax levy of about 7 cents for the operation of the fire territory or the firefighting service. There's about 3 cents levied for equipment. So a total of about 10 cents per hundred is paid by all residents of Lancaster and Harrison Township outside the city limits. That money, though collected from both townships, is sent by the auditor to Harrison Township. They are the administering unit for the fire territory. That tax levy of all those areas is built in such a way that it has an inflationary effect to it. A question was asked, how does this levy keep up with expenses as expenses increase? Well, with the way we operate now, it continues to increase as incomes increase, as property values increase, excise tax, and so on. So it's built to be a long-term funding solution. And as we looked at this, the task force chose to honor the existing agreement, and we are recommending no changes to it except that be for a 10-year period, and we'll cover the reasons for that a little later. I think there may be one final point to cover here. The last page indicates that the contract is actually executed by the City of Bluffton's Board of Public Works and Safety and the Harrison Township Fire Protection Board, and those signatories are there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Craig and Deputy Chief Wolf. Gentlemen.
Please remove your mask as you talk. Okay, my stuff.
Hi, I'm the Deputy Fire Chief, Chris Wolf. Kind of set the stage for Chief Craig here. Some of this information that we're going to be referencing is off of NFPA, which is basically National Fire Protection Association. Basically, they've got codes and standards. There's well more than 300 of them. They're designed to minimize the risk and effects of fire. So this thing is huge. If we bought the whole library, I don't know that we want to store it in the building, whether it's up front or in the back. Luckily, they have them online and stuff. The fire department shall provide an adequate number of personnel to safely conduct emergency scene operations. And that's where a lot of our conversation has been, besides just the fire stations. Operations of that shall be limited to those that can be safely performed by personnel available on the scene. That's been a very hot topic in trying to make sure our personnel go home and go to their families after incidents. Members operating in that hazardous area at an emergency scene shall operate in crews of 2 or more. These are all on that paper, trying to sit there and condense as much information as possible so everybody can take that with them. Basically, in the initial stages of the incident, where only one crew is operating in a hazardous area of a working structural fire, a minimum of 4 individuals shall be required, consisting of 2 individuals working as a crew in the hazardous area and 2 individuals present outside of this hazardous area. And they are available for the assistance in case something happens. That's their safety. The nice thing, it'd be awesome if we could sit there and arrive at any emergency scene and understand exactly what we're going into. Never been in a lot of these residences. And if you can imagine walking in the residence for the first time and not be able to see this far in front of your face and trying to perform a rescue and have, possibly really good heat, and then having somebody screaming, "Hey, my baby's still in there." That's kind of where this is coming from. Okay? I'm going to pass it over to Chief Craig.
Good evening. If I can touch just a little bit off of that, I'm going to be speaking on Documents 3 and Documents 4. Chief Wolf mentioned NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency. Those are the standards that we operate off of. Those standards set every rule that we work from, down to how we effect rescue, to how we dress at the fire station. It is all spelled out in NFPA. There's no NFPA police. Yeah, so there's rules that say 2 in, 2 out. Must have an IC, an incident commander outside. You must have a truck operator. That's a minimum of 6 people starting out at a scene. There's nobody that comes behind us and says you're doing it wrong. We're not an NFPA required state. We are an OSHA required state. OSHA 1910 CFR 29 requires 2 in, 2 out. Well, if we're not operating to OSHA every time we pull up at a scene, we are not operating to a standard that we can be fined by. Which, when this task force was started, we pushed for 6 members per shift to try to get us to meet them numbers. So that's where we're sharing some of these numbers so you can kind of understand how we operate, where those numbers come from. I just wanted to touch on that a little further. Document 4 was a letter I wrote to the task force as an introduction to the task force, explaining to them what it was, the needs of the fire department, the needs of staffing, the needs of apparatus, the needs of station, just a general synopsis of how we operate and the needs thereof. I'm not going to stand here and read this entire letter to you, but I will try to brief through it. The 3rd paragraph down, the department is responsible for fire protection within the city limits of Bluffton and is contracted for fire protection in Harrison and Lancaster townships, a total of 96 square miles for the first 2 coverage area. We'll discuss that a little further in the documents to follow. Understand that area takes us from 224 to 218, 800 East to Meridian Road. It's a very large area that our one department covers with our minimal staffing. The next 2 paragraphs discuss how the department's staffed, and I will have this document. You're more than welcome to read it at a later time. The next 3 paragraphs discuss the difficulties associated with the inability to safely staff the station for a safe response to emergency scene. And the only thing I'm going to pick out of that to read is having firefighters on the fire ground in those first few minutes have a profound effect on the rest of that scene. When we pull up, currently, there are 2 firefighters that come off that truck. One of them's an operator, the other one's a firefighter. He's standing there and he's waiting for additional crews, whether it be paid on call or other mutual aid departments to show up before he can effect a rescue or start fighting fire. And we fight fire from the inside 90% of the time. The staffing is where we have to push. We have to get to those OSHA and NFPA standards. Discussed in the previous document, the next 2 paragraphs, we talked about the NFPA staffing and the needs for that. I'm not going to continue to go over it. Please read this document. It gives you a very good explanation of how our department works. The last paragraph in this letter and the next page discusses what your firefighters do during non-emergency times and the needs for a new facility to keep them safe while they're doing it. As you notice in the top paragraph there, we go on 600 to 700 calls a year. This is done with large amounts of training in our off time to be able to effect those rescues, those med runs, those fire calls effectively and safely. Some years ago in the Hideaway fire, we lost our training center. And that was one of the items that I pushed for in the task force, that we could hopefully figure out how to purchase a new training center, or at least get the plans for one going. And that's something still Chief Wolf and myself will continue to push. The department is trying to grow, as you'll see in the next paragraph, to meet the needs of its tax base. We need to grow to match the needs of our city and the townships and the people that live there. I think that's where I'll leave that.
Thanks, Don. I hope we spend a lot of thought time on what it takes when firefighters pull up to a fire. Presently, we have 2 firefighters. Our paid on call, our volunteers are not available as they used to be. We literally, I'm told a former chief was once asked in public, what do you do when you pull up to a fire? We wait for others to arrive. If that's your home, that's my home. If that's a school, task force thinks that's not a good idea. Next document that I want to cover is document number 5. We want to increase the staff to where we have 4 firefighters on duty at all times. That, the fire chief and deputy asked for 6. We frankly, as a task force, could not find how to fund that, either from the townships or the city. What we believed we could recommend in good faith, and we viewed ourselves not as just a group to recommend something, but also a solution as to how to get there. We believe that we can fund 4 firefighters per shift. What that means is that the city of Bluffton would pick up 4 of those. We'll give you the rationale for that in a little bit. The townships would pick up 1 between them. Now, the fire territory language is written as such that that levy can't be increased. It is what it is. And we pleaded with some state folks, is there another way? The only way is to disband, totally reorganize, and we found no one in favor of that. So how do we pay for it? If you live in the city, you pay taxes that go into a lot of funds, one of them being the general fund. For many, many years, and we don't know how long, Bluffton has paid an amount of money from the general fund to the water fund for what has been called hydrant rental. Hydrant rental is not a known amount. How much does it really cost? There's a difference of opinion. Some folks think that it probably would be comprised of the cost of the water and the cost of hydrant replacement and repair annually. If you use that number, you're in the $50,000 range a year. If you use another number that some believe is the way to go, where you would look at what is the design cost of the water tower to give adequate pressure, line size to give adequate pressure, that number would be higher. We didn't arrive at an exact number. What we are saying is that we need to take enough money that has been being paid to the water utility out of tax money and keep it in the general fund to pay for 2 firefighters, about $180,000. What does that do to water rates? Well, it will increase water rates for residential customers $2.49 a month. My math says that's just under $30 a year to do that. Now, there is discussion, I want to tell you, of removing the whole $370,000 that's being paid to the water fund from the property tax, and if that happens, it's about double that amount per year. But for the firefighting purposes, we need what's highlighted on item 5, exhibit 5, and all residences have either 5/8 or 3" meters. That's how the city would pay for 2. The city would also, we recommend, go into the public safety local option income tax that has been accruing excess funds and can afford on an annual basis either all of the additional 2 firefighters or very close to it without touching the cash balance that's now grown to $930,000 at the end of April. So there is there are decisions to be made as to how to fund it. We're here to say we believe it can be funded without major impact on anyone. If you live in the townships, outside of the city, the additional 5 firefighters cost you nothing in additional taxes or fees, and I'll show you why. If you look at Exhibit 6, this is the state recorded financial statement for Harrison Township in Wells County as of December 31, 2020. What it shows is that there's a township fund of $757,000. It grew by approximately $97,000 in 2020. There's a firefighting territory fund, and all of that money is to be paid to the city of Bluffton. There's been a little kerfuffle between the city and the firefighting territory, but that money is due and payable to the city. It's not in debate, it's just the process of getting that done. There's also the fire territory equipment replacement. Now remember that that fund contains the firefighting funds not only for Harrison but also for Lancaster. When Lancaster Township residents pay, the auditor gleans that money and it all goes to Harrison Township. Then if you look at Lancaster Township, there is no firefighting fund to speak of. There is a very small amount that flows through as a kind of an extraneous tax that gets paid, and Marcia then sends it on to the fire territory. But the township fund in Lancaster Township didn't grow too much because they switched the rate to the Township Assistance Fund. Those are decisions made by the advisory board and the trustee. The fact is that in 2020, Lancaster Township took in about $170,000. Let me correct that. About $130,000 more than they spent. What we're suggesting is that each of the townships would pay an additional amount out of their township funds to support the fire protection. The money's already being collected. Township residents will pay no more in taxes or fees. It's just instead of going into a large savings account, it would go towards fire protection. I want to be real clear. In no way are we suggesting anything inappropriate by township officials. It's the way township government's set up. The great thing in Wells County is that we have conservative, appropriate advisory boards with trustees who aren't wasting the money. And it's there and can be used to support between them one additional firefighter. If you look at Exhibit A, you will see where the Indiana legislature in 2008 dealt with this issue of established fire territories who weren't generating enough money, and they authorized the townships to use any funds they have to supplement the fire territory funds. So let me quickly just walk through that. If you live in the township, not in the city, there's no township resident that would need to pay any additional money of any kind in taxes or fees to be able to fund the one additional firefighter the task force is asking the townships to do. What does that do? What it means is that there are 4 firefighters on duty. When they arrive, we have enough people there that if somebody needs to go in, they can go in almost immediately, and there are 2 people there to support them. Think about that with your kids and grandkids sleeping upstairs, or being in Norwell High School or Norwell Middle School, or parents being in River Terrace or Christian Care or wherever. The next page, item 9, we had a comment made in one of the meetings I held with an advisory group that said that our taxes already are higher than anywhere around us. I kind of knew that wasn't true. But we got on the state website, and you can do that. If you get on the Gateway website at the state, you can find your taxing unit, all of them around you, and say, what if I've got a $100,000 home? What if I got a 200, a 300, a 400? What would my taxes be in each of those locations? This includes school tax, county tax, township tax, city tax, every kind of tax there is in terms of property tax, and these are the numbers. We'll not spend any time on them, but it was an issue that came up that we thought we ought to address. Number 10, and I'm going to move through this, and Don, if you or Chris feel you want to add something, feel free. We wanted to look at how do you arrive at what's fair? If we need additional firefighters, how do you figure out what's fair? So we looked at a lot of different things, and thanks to Mike Watzenheiser, he provided this document. In terms of square miles, the townships have 92% of the square miles. The city has 8%. Well, what percent of firefighting do you attribute to area and trying to get there? In terms of, that's Lancaster, Harrison has 80% of the, 90% of the territory, and Bluffton has 10%. In terms of the addresses, Lancaster Township has 34% of the addresses. The city has 66% in Bluffton, Lancaster. In Harrison Township, the county has 21% of the addresses. The city has 79%. begin to get a sense of balance. Then we looked at proportionality in terms of runs. How many times does the fire department go to the city? How many times to the township? How many times for whatever? And thanks to Chris and Don for checking his work in getting these documents. In 2019, 86% of the runs were in Bluffton, 13.5 were in the fire territory. The square miles covered, we've already gone over that. This is just another look at it. Population projected, the 2010 census. We don't have the 20 numbers yet. 71% live in the city of Bluffton, 29% live in the township. In terms of assessed valuation, there are those who would say, well, the city's got all the assessed value. Well, that's not really true. Bluffton has $452 million, 62%. The territory has 38%, or $276 million. Funding source for the Bluffton Fire Department, excluding hydrant rental. We can debate that another time. The city of Bluffton pays 74%, the fire territory 26%. I hope you're beginning to get a sense of why we hit at the 20% in terms of additional staffing. Proposed allocation, $344,000 or 80% for the city, $86,000 or 20% for the townships. Anything you guys want to add on that page?
If I can. I'll just take a second. And this will go right into the next document too. Going back to document 10, thank you. Going back to document 10, when we talk about area versus addresses, whether it's 8% or 92%, Bluffton Fire Department is showing up there 100% of the time. And in most cases, fires in those densely populated areas are more intense and require more manpower and more apparatus. Well, as we're reading through this, let's not forget, it's not just about the area or the addresses. It's about getting the safe fire protection to all those areas.
Thanks, Don. The next one, take a look at the document 12. 626 total fire runs in 2019. Again, 66% in the city, 11.5% in Harrison Township Fire Territory, 15% in Lancaster Township Territory, and another important item, 20 runs, 6.6% for mutual aid. What does that mean? Ossian, Decatur, wherever our people go and assist there as well. Also, there were 321 EMS runs. The city of Bluffton provides EMS backup through the fire department if the EMS is out on a run and someone has a heart issue or whatever. The fire protection territory has not chosen to do that, and so my point is, we just want you to know, if you go, well, somebody goes, well, what about the EMS runs they go cover? And they go to cover those until the EMS can arrive. And then they're on. The next document, document 13 and 14, are, in my opinion, the heaviest documents we have. Document 13, and again, thanks to Mike Lotzenheiser, we asked him to develop for us people-dense areas. Not dense people areas, people-dense areas. Norwell High School and Middle School, Kingsland, Tocsin, Craigville, Murray, River Terrace. Think about River Terrace. All I can tell you is that we had a person say, and I hope they just meant lighthearted, But a person said, you know, fire protection is a hose and a bucket. Not for me. I hope not for you. When you think about our schools, when you think about our large churches, when you think about Christian care, when you think about River Terrace, when you think about the dense housing we have in places, we think 2 firefighters are not adequate. Frankly, I think everyone on the committee or the task force wishes we could have recommended the 6 as the chief and deputy chief asked. That's got to be somewhere down the future for Flushing. But we don't believe we can do it now. If you then look at the next, you're looking at Harrison Township, Veracruz, Pinedo, very large country church, the very large equipment and farm service locations that are located throughout. And I might add, when the combine catches on fire, it's equal to some pretty big houses. And that fire protection becomes extremely important. We've not talked about the commercial area. We've not talked about the growing and large and extremely important industrial area of our city and our community. We're recommending 2 stations. I hope you'll continue to look at this as we talk about that. We have this thing called a railroad that goes down through Bluffton. And some of us, at least me, when I entered this task force, I thought, yeah, we need 2 stations. We probably need one on the west side of the tracks and one on the east side. And pretty soon the chief said, we don't have 4-mile-long trains. If we were to locate a station at 200 North and 200 South, we begin to address the issues located and exemplified here of reaching those outer areas quicker and getting to where people and kids are quicker with 2 than we do with 1. We also can get across those tracks either from the north or the south and get there and get started before that other engine gets there. Next thing I want to cover briefly is cost. If you would look at document 15 and look at the lower part of that, interest rates right now are such that I would strongly recommend that the bond we would take and the total cost for the 2 stations plus police remodel is in about $8.5 million range. For 1 station is about $1.5 million less than that. So let's look what that means to us as taxpayers if you live in the city. If you live in the territory, you would not be paying, based on the task force recommendation, any cost for the station. Why? Number 1, the budgets are not there to support it. This would be a city facilities. The city would own them at the conclusion, and we believe that the cost would be borne by the city residents. If that were the case, scenario 1 says we have 2 stations and the police remodel. Those 2 stations would be separate projects under a holding corporation. If you had a home of $75,000, it'd be $10 a year, 120, 261, and 300, $102 a year. What that means is over a 20-year period, the life of that bond for new fire stations located much nearer to much of our fire protection territory, it cost you a total of about $2,000 if you had a $300,000 home. If your home is appraised higher than that or assessed higher than that, then it would increase accordingly. The scenario 3 is if it was one station and the police remodel. And I want to present this as objectively as I can, but one of the concerns of the task force was if we build one station, that pretty well sets the mold for quite a while. Because if you built one, it would be essentially centrally located, and how would you then justify building one direction or the other when you have an obligation to protect equally everybody in the territory as well as the city? This is conditioned on an agreement being worked out for a 10-year extension with the townships paying for that one additional firefighter. And I'm here to say, and you can look at the numbers, there's no question it can be done. It can be done for the townships at no additional cost to the taxpayers in any way. For the city, the additional firefighters will cost you about $30 a year. I'd like to introduce now Emily Howard, who is the person who did the hard work on the design, along with Todd and with Corey Miller. Corey was unable to be here, and while I think of it, I must also say the mayor sent his apologies. He had a commitment he made months ago, and he thought it best to keep that commitment. We understand that. Emily, would you talk to us about the design?
Hello, Todd and I first want to thank you for having us here today to talk about the fire station design and how we tried to work with. We worked with the task force and the city and police chiefs, fire chiefs, and little joke there, right? And tried to find out what they needed most, and it's a very unique situation with fire departments and how fire stations run and their needs for taking apparatus out in what order, and the arrangement is a very unique situation for fire station design. So really appreciate the chiefs helping us and really leading that. So what we wanted to share with you first today was the existing fire station images, because we thought maybe some of you haven't visited the fire station before, so we just kind of want to show you existing conditions of what they use right now. The first two images here show spaces in the apparatus bay, and you saw in the letter from the chief that there are 14 apparatus or pieces of equipment that have to be housed and tight on space for those items, and coming back and cleaning them, and you have to pull them out of the trailers and things like that. So that's what's going on in these images. Something you'll also notice in the images is how creative they are with space. They always need more space for storage, and so you'll see little glimpses of that here too. It's gonna come flip the top for me. Next on the left here, you see their kitchen space, and it's a little narrow. Probably for moving around there, a few guys trying to get lunch and gals get some dinner together and things like that. On the right is their workout facility. I wouldn't say there's any room for overhead presses in that space with the ceiling height. So that was another item on their list. On the left, I know it's a beautiful, beautiful picture, but this highlights the restroom shower and Roger's emphasis of the need for accommodating different gender needs in the modern day fire station. So this is the shower. On the right is where their maintenance equipment, tools are stored. Roger also spoke about the importance of the decontamination process and isolating the carcinogens that are present on their gear and apparatus and all those things, and not only keeping the community safe, but keeping the members of the fire department safe as they serve us. And on the left, we see their decon area. So we've got the extractor that they use to clean like the heavier particulates and dirtier gear. And then just next to it would be like what they call their Class B washing, which would be like their, going around their living space, day-to-day clothes, as well as their ice machine on the other side of the extractor. And so we're interested in the design, kind of separating and isolating those things. You might want clean ice, dirty beer, To the right is their hose tower. They do hang their hoses to dry them, and we were interested in finding a safer way to do this too, because currently they go up a ladder, which probably isn't the safest. But you're good with ladders, I understand. This highlights the storage, how creative they are with storage and how many things there are to store. So there's a storage room on the left and some storage that will leave. Maybe some of the members have constructed themselves on the right. Lots of files that need saved for years. Storage on the left and storage on the right. Okay, and this brings us to the floor plans for Station 1. So Station 1 would be like the larger of the two stations. And these images are to show kind of the thought process that went behind the layout and the design of the fire stations. And might be tricky to see from the projection, but on the left is Station 1, first floor. And the left side is all green, and that's for like the clean portion, the living, the administration portions of the building that you want to keep the carcinogens completely away from. And on the right, we have red going into yellow as we get towards the clean area in an effort to communicate, trying to keep all the, the carcinogens and the dirty things over on this side and keep them separate. There's also a dotted line delineating the separation of the administration area and living spaces and the apparatus bay and their support spaces. So on the second floor, you see that the second level on the left is completely living quarters, green. And there's some additional support spaces for the apparatus bay on the second floor on the right side of the bay. And that would be more of an orange area. The next slide shows the same floor plans with the spaces labeled and without the color overlay. So you'll see the lobby in the front and all the administrative areas here together with a conference room. And then the member firefighter living areas, including kitchen, dining, and day room with some shower spaces are all here, separate from the more public spaces. The apparatus bay, and the chiefs very thoughtfully suggested where they need their apparatus parked in order to get the equipment out that they need when they need it out. And so that was what drove the layout of the apparatus bay. And the support spaces, where they're going to do all their decontamination when they come back from fire, a structural fire, with their extractor room separated from their ice maker and their Class B. We talked about their day-to-day clothing would be more in a cleaner side of the apparatus. Second level of Station 1, we have all the dorm rooms, male and female locker space, fitness area, and male and female restrooms and showers. On the mezzanine are a couple other apparatus support spaces. Station 2 was designed with the same intent of keeping the green clean, separate from the orange kind of dirty areas. So you've got the administration areas, which there are less needed in Station 2, with the living, dining, and day room, as well as the fitness area separate from the public spaces here. The apparatus bay and its support spaces, and then the clean living spaces, dorms upstairs, and a mezzanine. The next slide shows all those same spaces labeled admin, living, fitness, apparatus bay with the support spaces, including decontamination and gear lockers, and then upstairs the dorms, showers, and and providing for both genders, as well as mezzanine with a little training opportunity. So anything we do in our office is, when it comes time to do the design, of the exterior of a building, we do what's called a charrette, and anybody in the office can participate that wants to. And we had a lot of excitement about the Bluffton fire stations, and we ended up overwhelming the task force possibly with 17 options. And here were some of them. And you can see they go from, I think the term Taj Mahal was used, to more standard or basic options. Different roof pitches, different feels or aesthetics. And we bring those to the task force or the decision makers, and they help us pare down what parts they like, what parts they don't like, and we try and also take economy into mind and the needs of the community and come up with the best solution based on that advice. So the next slide has, this is a conceptual representation of what we would move towards. I think this would be great for Bluffton. It seems to have all the things that were important to the chiefs and the task force and the city. And I think there are a couple more of this, as well as page 16 in your packet has a couple of the station rendering perspectives. Again for letting us come and share, and we'll take any questions you have for us or Roger.
In a little bit.
Okay.
Couple of things. Thanks, Emily.
Couple of things. We pared the cost as low as we could. We gave an impossible number initially, and that is we want construction costs to come in at the $5 million level for both stations. They came in at about 5.5. When you add land to that and equipment and all the other costs that come with it, that's where the total cost comes from. I, again, want to thank the task force. Well, let's take your questions. What's on your mind? Any questions?
Is the funding included that is the funding for that include like doubling the apparatus that you're gonna need, or where's all that coming from? I'm just thinking more the city. I'm the township, but I'm thinking for the city. But we're gonna pay the additional taxes.
Yeah, the equipment we have will be adequate at the time being. What we will do, as the chiefs have indicated, is when it's time to replace, we'll hang on to that's going to be replaced longer. And there is additional equipment already ordered that was not part of this. It was replacement, if you will. And so we'll be under that process. In addition, the city has a equipment replacement fund that it sets aside money annually. The chiefs say we're not setting it aside fast enough, but that'll be looked at budget time, I'm sure, to see. But there's no anticipation of a large purchase of additional equipment at this point. Our problem, to put it simply, began with staffing. When they presented to the council their budget review for 2021, and that happened in late summer of 2020, I think everybody on the council just kind of went, really? Wow. And that began, the mayor began to be concerned, and that's how this all evolved. Other questions? Did I answer your question? Okay. Other questions?
What was the thought behind,
Pardon?
what was the thought behind the larger station being north and the smaller station being south?
I don't know that that is the thinking.
Oh, okay.
We did not address which station goes where.
Okay.
That's a decision the council and the mayor will make. And we did not make a recommendation. I think there were assumptions, but those assumptions varied.
Sure.
Yes.
Roger, was there any consideration given to the existing facility, maybe moving the cop shop north because the city is migrating to the north? And the majority of the runs are in the central city. And building one new location, redoing that one, and then having the cop shop build another place maybe farther to the north.
There was brief consideration given to, as some have suggested, adding on to the existing station, if you will. Not much, because when you began to look at that and you began to consider, again, the outlying areas and the serviceability and the spreading, the growth of the city and the growth of the industrial area, all of those things dictate two locations, we think, instead of one. And again, building one new station is a little bit less than building the two, but it locks you in the future in a way that we thought was ill-advised.
Roger, one point that probably should be made is the size of the equipment that's leaving that building and they can barely get out the way.
Don, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So that building was originally built in 1971. It was built for apparatus that was a lot smaller than the apparatus we operate today. The department outgrew that building quite fastly, in my opinion. We're building a station, and within 20 years, I believe it was 91, 92, they had to add on to the station. And then here we are again, just busting at the seams. As you can see from Emily's pictures, we've about used every inch in that building that we could possibly use. If just taking a longer, wider picture, we still own our 1923 studs. That 1923 studs is about 22 foot in length and about 6 feet wide. Today's fire truck, our aerial truck, and I'll just jump straight to our biggest truck, is 45, 48 feet. 49, Chief Wolf's telling me. 49 feet long and 11 foot 10 inches tall. Going out a doorway that is 12 by 12. Oh, the guys don't have a lot of room for air coming in and out of that station. The truck's going to get bigger. When we spec out a truck, as Roger alluded to, we're accepting a new tanker here shortly. And we had to get the company to pare that tanker down to fit in our station. They wanted to build it to, it was 12 foot something, and I don't remember what it was now, but that truck will not fit in our door. So they actually had to do some things to that truck to make it smaller, which that meant they had to put a little less of this on it, a little less of that on it to make it work. Apparatus is growing. The fire department is not the same fire department it was in the 70s. I guess I can compare that to farming. Look at the tractors that were used in the 70s and the combines of today. And, they have to take them things apart just to drive them down the road. No different than the fire service. We have just physically outgrown that building. And we have looked at every option.
Well, Don, maybe I wasn't clear. What I was talking about was if the PD would move to a new location and you had the entire facility available, was that thought about?
Okay.
Yes. And if you go there and look at the equipment, you'll see that to get that equipment out of the station, we absolutely can't get any larger equipment than we have now in the future. But I want to come back to what I think is the critical issue. It is for me. That is, if we truly are going to have a partnership with the territories, now is the time to make certain we get closer to each segment of that territory. when you think about a potential fire at one of the Norwell schools, when you think about a fire at Craigville, when you think about adding almost 500 housing units within the next couple of years in the north part of the city, to operate out of just one area and to keep expanding the industrial park with one way to get across rather than two, Rick, in my mind, it makes no sense. Some may disagree.
I was talking about a new facility to the north, remodeling the existing facility, the police department moving out, so that you would have the entire space there to expand the building, because the populace of the city is moving north.
For right now. For right now. And I don't wish to debate you. You're entitled to your view, and I accept that
I'm
you
just asking what it was
don't agree.
talking about.
I will say this, that I think it would be very difficult for the council, at least one councilman, to support building two stations if the marriage between the fire territory and Bluffton City is not consummated for at least 10 years. We need to know what the future is. And I think and that's about people more than it's about stations. Any other question? Thank you. Any other question? We also have Rick, and I'm getting old, and I can't remember the gentleman's name beside you, who's the advisory board member from Harrison Township.
I try to forget it all.
Jeff Hewitt. Jeff, thank you for being here. Rick, thank you for being here. As Township Advisory Board members, we appreciate that. Anything else? We thank you for coming. Again, thank you for the work of the task force. I want to recognize Josh Hunt from City Council. Rick Elwell is here as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining. And Scott Mincer, who's been broadcasting this, Wells County Boys. Thank you. Good night.